Hello and welcome. My name's Angie Holden and I'm the blogger behind the Country Chic Cottage. Today we're going to talk broadly about laser types. So if you are shopping for a laser or you already have one and you want to upgrade, you may be confused about all these different types of lasers, all these words. So what is a diode laser? How does it compare to a CO2 or a fiber laser? What's an infrared laser? Do you need one? We're going to cover all of that in this video. Now, broadly, as a laser, the higher the wattage, the more powerful the laser is. However, you need to consider the wattage of the laser as well as the type of laser when shopping around, because the type can make a huge difference. Now, what exactly do the types mean exactly? So the types of lasers actually sort of refer to the wavelength and a few other very technical things. However, I want to break this down into very simple terms. We're going to talk about each type and what it does, so you know the differences when you are shopping for a laser. So when you're shopping for a laser, you're going to choose the right type for you first, and that's the right wavelength, but generally we're going to call it type. Then after that, you can choose the power that you think you're going to need. The power is the wattage. So wavelength and wattage technically, but we are going to talk about type as well as power. And as we're talking about what these lasers do, we're going to talk about two different types of things, and that's cutting and engraving. So cutting is cutting all the way through a material, where engraving, or you might see scoring sometimes, actually just sort of removes part of the material on the surface or marks the surface. So now let's dive into the types. So I am going to start with sort of the popular model right now because it is most affordable. And that is a diode laser. So you might see a diode laser also referred to as a blue light laser. Now these can be a wide variety of power ranges. So the Glowforge Spark and Glowforge Aura are examples of very low wattage, low power lasers in this category. And you have all the way up to something like the xTool S1 where you can get higher powered lasers within this category. Now these are budget friendly, which is why we're covering them first. And a lot of times they're very compact and often very beginner friendly, which is great for someone that's starting out with lasers. Now these can work on things like wood, paper, leather, maybe even some plastics. And this is totally going to depend on the wattage of a laser that you pick, what the thicknesses are going to be, and what your restrictions are going to be as far as materials go. But when we start listing the cons of a diode laser, there are some common restrictions. One of the most common is that it just frankly does not work with things like clear acrylic. Clear materials will not cut or engrave with a diode laser. It just can't happen. Like, it scientifically is impossible for those to work with a diode laser. Also, they are way slower than something like a CO2 laser. So while they might be great for hobbyists, if you are building your business and you want to sell those laser cut and engraved items, this category or type of laser might not be for you. You might not want to wait on the slowness of these diode lasers, and you might want to branch into things like clear acrylic. I did also want to mention here that low wattage diode lasers, at times I have had issues with light colors, white, blue, those type of colors, especially on the lower wattage end of diode lasers. So be careful there if you pick a diode laser as far as which wattage you might choose. So how do you do clear acrylic and get faster results? The answer would be a CO2 laser. And I recently reviewed the FLUX beamo, and if you have not seen that video, I would encourage you to go back and watch it. I will link to it in the description below this video. So a CO2 laser can go anywhere from, like 30 watts to 150 watts. You can get very large with these lasers. So some of these lasers are so large that a typical craft room would not house them. That's why I reviewed the FLUX beamo. It is a small, compact, budget-friendly example of a CO2 laser. So if you continue on with the pros and cons of this video and decide a CO2 laser is for you, I would encourage you to look at the FLUX beamo. Other examples of a CO2 laser would be the Glowforge Plus, the Glowforge Pro, Omtech makes some. There are a variety of ones on the market. These will cut and engrave a wide variety of materials, including that clear acrylic. So basically you can think about this as everything the diode laser will do plus more, and it will do it faster than the diode laser will. You won't have all those restrictions. So you can cut and engrave clear acrylic, clear glass. You don't have to worry about light colors and all of these restrictions. CO2 lasers don't have any of those cons that I mentioned for diode lasers. Now they generally are larger and more expensive, but like I said, I did review the FLUX beamo just because of that, because it is a compact size as well as a budget-friendly option for those of you that would like to dive into the CO2 laser category. And a CO2 laser is perfect for those, serious hobbyists that really want a laser that has some power and don't want the restrictions. But also I highly recommend CO2 lasers for those of you that are operating small businesses. I do think that this is the level that you're going to need for a small business, at least a CO2 laser. Now we're going to get into another type of laser in a minute that you might want to consider depending on your business. And then CO2 lasers are often used by professionals, and that's getting into those really large ones that don't exactly work in a craft room. You can get very large with this type of laser. Now, these may not be quite as beginner friendly. You are going to need some water cooling. And in the FLUX beamo video, I did show the refill process for the cooling system on that particular laser. So you can kind of get an idea, but you will need to check the coolant and do a few more additional things that you would not have to necessarily do with a diode laser. So our next category type of laser is going to cover infrared and fiber lasers. So these are the lasers you are going to want to pay attention to if you say engraving things is what I want to do. Pay attention to this section. So these lasers are what I recommend if you want to engrave metal. And this is really engrave metal. Plus, when you get up into the higher powered versions of these lasers, you can do things like 3D engraving almost, where you are getting really down deep into the surface. So if you're thinking about deep engraving on metal, this type of laser is absolutely what I recommend. And you can get very small with this, so the WeCreat Lumos, xTool F1 Ultra, lasers like that are actually very small, very portable. So that makes this laser category perfect for those of you that want to take your laser on site to craft shows and personalize things on site. So the pros include the ability to engrave as well as being very precise. I love engraving with these lasers because I can get it exactly right. The con for me here is that the working area is often very small with these lasers in that compact size that you would take to a craft fair. Now you can get these lasers in larger sizes, but I really like the compact size version of these. However, the working area is also restricted. And overall, these lasers can be expensive for those entry-level users. So you might want to consider the diode laser or the CO2, that FLUX beamo that I talked about, as a good beginner-friendly entry-level price of a laser, rather than this section where the lasers might be a little bit more expensive. However, if those pros really appeal to you of being able to take the laser anywhere you want to go, engrave metal with ease and being very precise, then definitely look into this category of laser. Then under sort of like other types of lasers, I'm going to include combo lasers here. So some of these lasers, like let's say the FLUX beamo, it's a CO2 laser, but you can purchase a diode head for it. So you can kind of combo the two within one box. Some other examples are like the xTool F1 Ultra, where you combine the diode with the infrared head. So there are a variety on the market, or a lot of times when you purchase a laser, you can add heads onto it and sort of combo within one package. And that makes it less expensive. So instead of owning two lasers, you can own sort of one that is a combo. Then there are other types of lasers out there. UV lasers are one example. However, a lot of those get way more pricey than I want to talk about within this video. I don't feel like a lot of those appeal to crafters or the very small business owner. However, if you are outgrowing the types of lasers that I mentioned in this video, continue on in your research, because there are other lasers on the market that might fit the bill. If your business is really growing and you need that higher production, then you might want to research those other types and go even larger. So as always, we want to talk about laser safety. Any of the lasers that I mentioned will need to be ventilated in some way, either out a window or by purchasing an air filter. You also always want to check that the materials that you are cutting or engraving are laser compatible, because some materials can be toxic when cut with a laser. And then finally, always protect your eyes no matter what type of laser that you are operating. So hopefully this helps demystify the types of lasers for you so you can narrow down the type. After you narrow down the type, you'll need to decide which actual laser within that category works for you. So consider the wattage and then what lasers are within that wattage that are within your budget. Be sure that the materials that you want to cut and engrave are included within that laser. And then finally, do you have the space for the laser that you picked? Remember that some lasers are very, very large. So you always want to go into space considerations before purchasing any laser. So hopefully that helped you. Now, if you have questions, you don't know which type of laser is for you still, drop down in the comment section and explain to me what you want to make. If you're a beginner or not, maybe broadly what your budget is and space considerations, and I will definitely help you narrow down the type of laser, and I can even suggest some models in each category for you. And also in the description below this video, I am linking to models in each of these categories, and I'm going to link to my full video on those because I never want you to make a purchasing decision this large on this short of a video. So I want you to click over to my full video on each of these lasers and watch the full video, and then decide if that laser is right for you or not. Now, if this video helped you, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already, head on over to my YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. I have videos just like this one every single week, and trust me, you don't want to miss any of those. So thank y'all so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.